The sea wind struck Thorncliff Manor as if it had come to take back the dead. It tore over the black carriage, rattled the iron lanterns, and bent the cliff grass toward the white violence of the waves below. Clara Hartwell stood on the gravel drive with a brown shawl wrapped around her thin shoulders. A child clutched against her breast, and an old golden hound planted at her feet like a soldier. The carriage had brought her here once before. On the 14th of October, it had delivered her as a bride. By sunset, it had taken her husband away. Now, on the 20th of December, it had returned. The door opened. Adrian, Duke of Thorncliff, stepped down into the salt grey air. He looked almost exactly as Clara remembered him from their wedding day. Tall, severe, dark-haired, his face composed into the kind of coldness that never needed cruelty because silence served it better. He had married her because he required a wife in name, and she had accepted because her uncle had made it clear that a frail, dowryless niece was a burden no respectable household wished to keep. Adrian had offered her a title, a remote manor, and peace, not love, not companionship, not even the promise of return. Clara had accepted his bargain because it was better to be forgotten in a cliffside house than slowly erased in a drawing room where everyone spoke of her weakness as if she were not there. But she was not alone now. The child in her arms stirred. His curls were damp from the sea mist. His small fingers tangled in her shawl. Behind the Duke, another man descended from the carriage. Julian Thorncliff, Adrian's cousin, his advisor, the man who had smiled when Clara first entered the manor and said, very softly, that a duchess without her husband present ought to be grateful for guidance. He had locked the estate ledgers away. He had intercepted her letters. He had told the servants her nerves were unreliable. And when Clara found the fevered boy on the cliff road with a broken silver locket pinned beneath his shirt, Julian had ordered him sent to the workhouse before dawn. Clara had stood before the nursery door and refused. Now Julian smiled at her over the Duke's shoulder. Your Grace, he said, you see the difficulty. Her condition has worsened. She has filled the house with strays. The old hound growled. Clara did not look at Julian. Insults were bait. She had learned not to bleed where men like him could point. Adrian's eyes moved from her face to the child, then to the lit windows of Thorncliff behind her. When he had left, the house had been dark, damp, half-shuttered, and sour with neglect. Now smoke rose from the kitchen chimney. The portico lantern burned. Holly and dried lavender hung on the front door. You were said to be ill, Adrian said. Clara tightened her hold on the boy. You were said never to be coming back. The wind filled the silence. Julian gave a small laugh. There, you see? Dramatic imaginings. I wrote to you the moment she took in the foundling. A parish boy. Nothing more. I gave orders for him to be removed. The boy remains tonight, Clara said. Julian's smile hardened. You have no authority to decide that. Clara lifted her chin. Her body ached from the cold. Her wrists burned from carrying Hugh too long. But she had learned that dignity did not require strength to be visible. Sometimes it was merely the refusal to bend. The child was dying when I found him, she said. Authority was less urgent than breath. Adrian looked at her then, not at the shawl, not at the frailty others had described, but at the steadiness with which she stood against the wind. The child whispered, Duchess. The word was small. It reached everyone. Julian's mouth tightened. Adrian's gaze sharpened. Clara lowered her cheek to the boy's hair. Yes, Hugh. I am here. Adrian removed one glove and held his bare hand toward the child, palm open. Hugh hid against Clara's shoulder. Adrian did not step closer. He simply let his hand fall. No child leaves this house in such weather, he said. Julian turned. Adrian. The boy remains, the Duke said. No warmth entered his voice, but the command stood like a wall. For the first time since October, Clara saw Julian fall silent. Inside, Thorncliff Manor smelled of beeswax, damp stone, rosemary broth, and smoke from fires that had once been forbidden in half the rooms to save coal that Julian sold elsewhere. The servants stood in the hall, watching with careful faces. Eliza, the housekeeper, held a lantern near the stairs. Her eyes went first to Clara, not Adrian. That was one of the things Clara had built in the Duke's absence. Not obedience, trust. Hugh coughed against her neck, a tight, tearing sound. Clara moved at once. Eliza, the basin in the nursery. Marianne has the kettle. Already on the hob, Your Grace. Julian's jaw flexed at the title. Adrian watched the exchange. What is wrong with him? Neglect, cold, hunger, a fever that settled in the lungs. Clara did not say she knew all four too well. I can keep him breathing if the night is not cruel. She turned to the stairs. Adrian followed. Clara stopped and looked back. Not Mr. Julian. A silence fell hard in the hall. Julian's face darkened. You forget yourself. No, Clara said. That was what you counted on. No servant moved. No one breathed loudly. Adrian looked from Clara to Julian. Then he said, Julian will wait in the library. Julian stared. I am your advisor. You are waiting in the library. The words were quiet enough to freeze the room. Clara climbed the stairs before gratitude could weaken her knees. Halfway up, Hugh's weight pulled at her shoulder. Pain flared down her back. She stopped for 1 second, fingers pressed against the rail. Adrian did not offer to take the child. He only lifted the candle from the wall sconce and walked 1 step ahead, lighting the worn stair where the carpet had frayed. It was a small mercy. Clara nearly hated him for noticing. The nursery had once been a room for broken picture frames and forgotten trunks. Clara had made it warm by stubborn inches. Thick curtains blocked the draught. Lavender hung above the mantel. A clean basin waited near the bed. On the table lay willow bark, honey, thyme, folded cloths, and the broken silver locket that had begun everything. She settled Hugh upright against the pillows. His breathing worsened. The room changed at once. There was no duke, no cousin, no title. There was only a child fighting for air. Steam, Clara said. Eliza poured hot water into the basin. Clara leaned Hugh forward, one palm steady against his back. Small breaths. Look at the candle. Count with me. Hugh gasped, shuddered, tried again. Adrian stood by the fire, utterly still. Clara felt him watching, but he did not interfere. That alone set him apart from every man who had ever called her delicate and then seized control. Her fingers reached for the honey jar. The lid stuck. Her hands, cold and tired, slipped. A folded cloth appeared beside her. Not a hand, not an assumption, a tool. Clara wrapped it around the lid and twisted. The seal gave. Thank you, she said. Adrian stepped back. For 2 hours, the night held its breath. Clara counted Hugh's pulse. Eliza refreshed the steam. Adrian fed the fire before the room cooled, passed cloths before Clara asked, and kept the hound from climbing onto the bed in loyal distress. No speeches, no foolish comfort, only work. Near midnight, Hugh's breathing eased. The child slept with one hand closed around Clara's sleeve. Clara remained beside him, her shoulders aching, her eyes sore from candle smoke. She did not move. If she moved, the fear might find room. A blanket settled over her. She looked up. Adrian had placed it around her shoulders without standing too near. "You should rest," he said. "If I leave, he wakes. Then I shall sit." "There is no need." He drew the second chair to the far side of the bed. "There is a chair." The answer was so grave, so practical, that Clara almost smiled. Almost. The sea battered the rocks below. The nursery fire burned low and steady across the sleeping child. Clara watched the Duke of Thorncliff sit in silence, as if keeping vigil for a foundling boy were the most natural duty in the world. She had survived many nights alone. This was the first one that felt different. By morning, frost glazed the windows. Hugh slept late, the hound snoring beneath the bed, with the satisfaction of a creature who considered himself essential to medicine. Clara woke stiff-necked in the chair, a wooden horse tucked into her lap. Someone had carved it in the night. She found Adrian in the breakfast room, standing before a bowl of porridge with the grave uncertainty of a man facing a hostile treaty. "For Hugh?" Clara asked. "For the dog if negotiations fail." Clara looked down quickly, so he would not see the full shape of her smile. "Hugh regards porridge as punishment," she said. "Then I shall present it as a diplomatic crisis." A flicker of warmth moved through the room and vanished before either of them could name it. Then Julian entered with a sheaf of blue papers under his arm. "I am relieved to find the household amused," he said. "Since Her Grace has taken to governing estates, curing lung fevers, and adopting strangers, I have requested Mr. Calder from Newcastle to review the matter." Clara poured tea, no sugar, a little milk. Her fingers were steady. "Mr. Calder is a solicitor, a practical man. Then he will notice practical theft." Julian's smile thinned. Adrian set down his cup. "Explain." Clara placed 3 folded receipts on the table. Coal paid for and never delivered. Laudanum billed and never received by the apothecary. Wool purchased for tenants and sold elsewhere. All under Mr. Julian's authority. The room tightened. Julian laughed too lightly. "She has misunderstood household accounts." Clara looked at Adrian, not pleading, not accusing, simply offering the truth. "The ledgers are in the library," she said. "I marked every entry." Adrian looked at Julian. "You will produce every account book by noon." "Adrian." "Noon." The word cracked like ice beneath a boot. For 2 days, Thorncliff became a house of opened cabinets and unsealed drawers. Clara worked in the library beneath tall windows streaked by rain, her ink-stained fingers moving from receipt to ledger to tenant roll. Adrian sat across from her, not above her, not behind her, across from her, where she could see whether he followed. And he did follow. He asked sharp questions. He turned the lamp toward the page she held. He did not take the pen from her hand. When her tea cooled, he poured another cup exactly as she preferred it. "No sugar, a little milk." Clara stared at it. "You remembered." "I am not entirely without useful qualities," he said. This time, she did smile. The smile was brief. It disappeared as quickly as winter sun on water. But Adrian saw it. Clara knew because his hand stilled on the ledger. She looked away first. Respect was dangerous, kindness more so. On the third afternoon, with rain lashing the library windows, Clara opened the broken locket and set it between them. Adrian's face changed. Not much, only enough for Clara to understand that the silver meant more than Julian had claimed. It was pinned inside Hugh's shirt, she said. Julian told me it was market silver. Adrian lifted the locket. Inside, beneath tarnish, were the initials E.T. Edward Thorncliff, he said. Your brother. He did not answer at once. Outside, the sea wind roared in the chimney. Edward spoke of a marriage before he died. Adrian said at last. No one believed him. Fever, grief, opium. He named a woman called Rose, Cornwall. A chapel near Penzance. Clara looked toward the nursery ceiling, where Hugh's faint singing drifted through the boards. If Edward had married, if Hugh was his son, then the boy was no parish foundling. He was blood, perhaps heir, perhaps the living proof Julian most needed erased. We need the parish register, Clara said, and witnesses, Adrian added. His voice was controlled, but Clara saw his hand close around the locket until the knuckles paled. The library door handle moved. Only once. Clara crossed the room and opened it. The corridor was empty. But on the floor lay a torn scrap of blue paper. Julian's paper. She picked it up. Made before the claim is examined. Remove the boy. I, Calder, will swear. Adrian read it once. All softness left the air. Clara expected anger. Instead, he looked at her. What do you advise? No one had ever asked her that in such a room. No one had ever made her answer matter before power acted. She drew a slow breath. 2 riders. 1 to Penzance for the parish register. 1 to London for your solicitor. Temporary guardianship first. Title claim later. Eliza can swear to the locket. Frederick saw Julian try to send Hugh away. Rose carried my intercepted letters. We need statements before Julian buys silence. Adrian watched her as if the room had just revealed its true center. You planned all this. I had to. Alone. Clara looked toward the ceiling again. No, she said. That was the truth Julian had failed to understand. She had not found romance in Thorncliff. Not then. She had found something stronger. A housekeeper who disobeyed cruel orders. A maid who hid letters under flour sacks. A groom who repaired the nursery window in secret. A hound who slept across the boy's door. A child who called her Duchess before the world agreed. She had been left alone. She had not remained so. That night, Hugh's fever did not return. The relief was so sharp, it frightened Clara more than dread had done. She sat in the nursery after he slept, turning the wooden horse in her lap. Adrian stood in the doorway. I sent the riders, he said. Both? Both. And Julian? Watched. Clara nodded. He will strike before the papers return. Yes. You should have remained in London, she said. Not because she meant it, but because fear often disguised itself as warning. Adrian did not enter the room until she looked at him. I should not have left you here without knowing what kind of house I had placed around you. You gave me what you promised. A roof and a title. And silence, Clara said. The truth stood between them. It did not shout. It did not need to. Adrian looked at the sleeping boy, then at the repaired curtains, the herbs above the mantel, the chair worn by Clara's vigils. I thought silence was kindness. I thought distance spared harm. It spared you. The words escaped before she could soften them. Adrian accepted the blow without defense. Yes, he said. It did. That honesty was worse than excuse. It entered Clara quietly and found the part of her that had been waiting, foolishly, for him to claim ignorance. He had known he was leaving. He had not known what leaving would cost. The distinction mattered. Not enough to heal, enough to begin. The next morning, frost hardened the gravel drive. Eliza burst into the nursery while Clara was washing Hugh's cup. Your Grace, Mr. Julian is in the hall. Mr. Calder is with him. And constables. Hugh looked up from the rug. Am I going? He asked. The cup slipped slightly in Clara's hand. She caught it before it fell. She knelt before him and took both his small hands. Not while I stand in this house. His eyes searched hers. Duchess promise. Clara promise, she said. And Duchess promise. The hound rose, already growling. Clara tied the repaired locket on a ribbon around her neck. It rested against her plain grey gown. Cool as a verdict. In the great hall, Julian stood beneath the ancestral portrait with Mr. Calder and 2 constables. Adrian waited at the foot of the stairs, his face carved from discipline. Calder unfolded a paper. Your Grace, Mr. Julian Thorncliff has presented concerns regarding the custody of a parish child and the Duchess's capacity to govern household matters. Clara descended the last step. Every servant watched. Once, such a room would have made her shrink. Now she felt the weight of every person behind her, not pressing her down, but holding her upright. Mr. Calder, she said, before you continue, state plainly whether you come as a solicitor of Chancery or as Mr. Julian's paid agent. Calder blinked. Julian snapped. She has no right. She has every right, Adrian said. Clara did not look back. If she leaned now, she would forget how to stand. Calder cleared his throat. I am here in an advisory capacity. Then you cannot remove a child without proper authority. Clara said. Nor can you examine a duchess as though she were a parcel mislaid in her own hall. A maid gasped softly. Julian's face purpled. Clara held up the locket. This was found on the boy when I brought him from the cliff road. Mr. Julian saw it and called it false. He then tried to send the child away before dawn. He then intercepted my letters to my husband. Ask him why. Julian's eyes flicked toward the stairs, toward the nursery. The hound moved first. Adrian moved faster. He stepped into Julian's path without touching him. His voice remained low. One more step toward that child, and you will be delivered to the magistrate for attempted abduction, fraud against this estate, and interference with ducal correspondence. Julian sneered, but the constables shifted away from him. You would ruin your own blood for a beggar, Julian hissed. The front door opened before Adrian could answer. A rider stumbled in, boots caked in mud, a sealed packet in hand. Express for his grace. The hall went so still Clara heard the sea below the cliffs. Adrian broke the seal. He read the first page. Then, in front of everyone, he handed it to Clara. He let the room see whose judgment he trusted. Clara read. The words blurred once. She forced them clear. The parish clerk in Cornwall confirmed the record. Edward Thorncliff, eldest son of the late Duke, had married Rose Hartwell in a coastal chapel. A son had been baptized, Hugh Edward Thorncliff. The mother had died of fever. A nurse had carried the child north and vanished near the road. The claim was not complete. The law would still require witnesses, seals, petitions. Men in formal rooms pretending truth needed permission to exist. But Hugh was no stray. No orphanage could take him. No cousin could erase him without a fight the whole county would hear. Clara handed the paper to Calder. "Read it aloud." Julian whispered. "No." "Read it," Adrian said. Calder read. With every line, Julian grew smaller. When the final word echoed beneath the portraits, Eliza stepped forward. "I witnessed the locket." Frederick the groom followed. "I saw Mr. Julian's man waiting to take the boy before dawn." Rose the maid lifted her chin. "I carried letters from her grace. Mr. Julian took them. One by one, Thorncliff spoke. Not loudly. Enough. Julian looked around the hall and found no loyalty left to purchase. "You will regret this," he said. Clara stepped toward him. The hall turned with her. "No," she said. "I regret only that I was ever taught to be quiet for men who deserved the noise of truth. Julian left before noon, stripped of account keys, authority, and welcome. When the carriage carried him down the cliff road, no one waved. Only Hugh, watching from the landing, asked, 'Am I staying?' Clara crossed the hall, climbed the stairs, and gathered him carefully in her arms. Then she turned so the household, the constables, Mr. Calder, and Adrian all saw her answer. 'Yes,' she said. 'You are staying.' The word moved through the house like flame catching. Staying. After that, the story did not become simple. Truth never made a path smooth. It only placed a lamp in the hand. Letters went to London. A proper magistrate came, this time with respect rather than presumption. The temporary guardianship was filed. The title claim would take months, perhaps longer. Julian's thefts were documented. Coal was restored to the tenant cottages. Dr. Arbuthnot sent an apology written in a hand too frightened to be elegant. Hugh recovered by degrees. He still coughed in the mornings. He still regarded porridge as an enemy state. But he began to laugh more often, and the hound followed him with the solemn patience of a nursemaid in fur. Adrian did not return to London. At first, he said it was because the estate required order, then because the solicitor might need him, then because the roads were poor. Clara said nothing. She only noticed his travel trunk remained in the library corner, half packed. A man could stay in a house and still be ready to leave it. On Christmas Eve, snow began to fall over Thorncliff. The manor drew inward. Fires burned in rooms that had been closed for years. Eliza supervised spiced cider as if Parliament had placed the matter in her hands. Rose stitched Hugh a blue coat from wool Julian had never delivered. Frederick carved a second wooden horse because Hugh had informed him the first one was lonely. Clara sat in the library drafting plans for a village sickroom funded from recovered estate money. The pen made a steady sound over paper. Adrian stood by the window, reading the latest letter from London. "Hugh remains under our protection until the formal hearing," he said. "Our protection," Clara repeated softly. Adrian turned. Yes, the word was plain. It did not tremble. It held. Clara looked at the half-packed trunk. Adrian followed her gaze. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he crossed the room, opened the trunk, and began removing his folded shirts one by one. Clara's hand stilled around the pen. He placed the shirts in the carved wardrobe, then the cravats, then the books, then the small case of razors. Last, he lifted the empty trunk and set it against the far wall. No declaration could have struck her harder. When he returned, he held out the key. Clara stared at it. "What am I to do with that?" she asked. "Keep it," he said, "until I learn not to require exits." Her throat tightened. She rose, crossed the space between them, and placed the key back in his palm, closing his fingers around it. "This house has room," she said. "Even for men who learn slowly." A sound escaped him, almost a laugh, almost grief. He bowed over her hand. His touch was brief, reverent, restrained. Not possession, not demand. A promise asking permission to remain. Clara let it. On 12th night, Thorncliff opened its great hall, not to the ton, not to those who measured worth in invitations and blood. It opened to tenants, servants, witnesses, children, and neighbors who had seen Clara stand when others expected her to fade. Candles lined the mantel. Holly crowned the archway. The repaired pianoforte played imperfectly and therefore beautifully. Hugh stood beside the hound and informed each guest that he was helping receive company. Though the hound, he admitted, did most of the difficult work, Adrian stood at Clara's side, not before her, not behind her, at her side. When the solicitor William arrived with fresh papers, Adrian did not take them to the study. He asked Clara to stand with him before the hearth. "The temporary guardianship is confirmed," William announced. "The child known as Hugh Edward Thorncliff remains under the Duke's protection and the Duchess's household authority while his claim is examined." The Duchess's household authority. Clara felt those words enter the room and settle in every place Julian had once tried to make small. Adrian turned to her and placed the keys of Thorncliff Manor in her hands. Before everyone, kitchen, pantry, linen room, west wing, estate office, nursery, strongbox, the house made metal. "This manor has survived because of you," he said. "It is time the house answered to the person who kept it alive." Clara could have accepted silently. Instead, she turned to the room. "Hugh stays," she said. "The village sick room opens before the next frost. Every tenant cheated of coal or wool will be repaid. And no child on Thorncliff land will be sent away because he is inconvenient." The hall was silent. Then Eliza curtsied. Frederick bowed. Rose wept openly and blamed the candle smoke. Hugh raised one hand. "And the dog stays." Laughter broke the room wide open. Adrian looked at Clara, and for the first time since she had known him, his face held no winter she needed to survive. Outside, the wind struck the manor and found it warm. Later, after the guests had gone, and Hugh had fallen asleep with one hand buried in the hound's fur, Clara returned to the gravel drive. The cliff path shone beneath moonlit frost. The sea moved below, black and silver, as fierce as the day Adrian returned. This was where she had stood with a child in her arms and a house at her back. This was where he had found her no longer alone. Boots sounded on the gravel. Adrian came to stand beside her and offered his arm. Clara took it. Behind them, Thorncliff glowed in every window. "You might still go to London," she said. "I might," he answered. Her fingers tightened. Then he added, "But my trunk is empty." The wind lifted her shawl. This time, she did not pull it tighter. From inside came Hugh's sleepy voice calling first for Clara, then for Adrian, then for both at once. Clara turned toward the lighted house. "I am wanted," she said, not as a question, but as truth. Adrian covered her gloved hand with his. "You are home." The sea wind rose again, rushing over the cliff grass, past the repaired lantern, against the warm stone of Thorncliff Manor. It no longer sounded like something coming to take back the dead. It sounded like something carrying news. The bravest thing she had ever done was not surviving the cold. It was choosing to stay when the fire was finally lit. The end. Outro. Thank you for staying beside the fire until the end of Clara and Adrian's story. Which moment stayed with you most? The child on the cliff road, the empty trunk, or the keys of Thorncliff? Subscribe for the next Regency romance. The kettle is always on.